ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and oozy smell, or yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door like a porthole, painted green, with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened onto a tube-shaped hall like a tunnel, a very comfortable tunnel without smoke, with paneled walls and floors tiled and carpeted, provided with polished chairs and lots of pegs for hats and coats, because this hobbit was fond of visitors. The tunnel wound on, going fairly but not quite straight into the side of the hill. The hill, as all the people for many miles round called it, and many little round doors opened out of it, first on one side and then on another. No going upstairs for the hobbit. Bedrooms, bathrooms, cellars, pantries, lots of those. Wardrobes. Oh, he had whole rooms devoted to clothing. Kitchens, dining rooms, all were on the same floor, and indeed on the same passage. The best rooms were all on the left-hand side going in, for these were the only ones to have windows, deep-set round windows looking over his garden and meadows beyond, sloping down to the river. This hobbit was a very well-to-do hobbit, and his name was Baggins. The Bagginses had lived in the neighborhood of the hill for time out of mind, and people considered them very respectable, not only because most of them were rich, but also because they never had any adventures or did anything unexpected. You could tell what a Baggins would say on any question without the bother of asking him. Now, this is a story of how Baggins had an adventure and found himself doing and saying things altogether unexpected.
There was a dwarf at the door.
Okay, there was a knock on the door, right? Okay. I'm going to pick up at that point. Just before tea time, there came a tremendous ring on the front doorbell, and then he remembered. He rushed and put on the kettle and put out another cup and saucer and an extra cake or two and ran to the door. "Oh, I'm so sorry to keep you waiting," he was going to say, when he saw that it was not Gandalf at all. It was a dwarf with a blue beard tucked into a golden belt, very bright eyes under his dark green hood. As soon as the door was opened, he pushed inside, just as if he'd been expected. He hung his hooded cloak on the nearest peg, and "Dwellin' at your service," he said with a low bow. "Bilbo Baggins at yours," said the hobbit, too surprised to ask any questions for the moment. When the silence that followed had become uncomfortable, he added, "I'm just about to take some tea. Pray come and have some with me." A little stiff, perhaps, but he meant that kindly. And what would you do if an uninvited dwarf came and hung his things up in your hallway without a word of explanation? They had not been at table long. In fact, they had hardly reached the third cake when there came another even louder ring at the bell. "Excuse me," said the hobbit, and off he went to the door. "So you've got here at last." That's what he was going to say to Gandalf at this time. But it was not Gandalf. Instead, there was a very old-looking dwarf on the step with a white beard and a scarlet hood, and he too had hopped inside as soon as the door was open, just as if he'd been invited. "I see they've begun to arrive already," he said when he caught sight of Dwellin's green hood hanging up. He hung his red one next to it and said, "Balin at your service," with his hand on his breast. "Thank you," said Bilbo with a gasp.
It was not the correct thing to say, but they have begun to arrive had flustered him. He liked visitors, but he liked to know them before they arrived, and he preferred to ask them himself. He had a horrible thought that the cakes might run short, and then he, as the host, he knew his duty and stuck to it, however painful. He might have to go without. "Come along in and have some tea," he managed to say, after taking a deep breath. "A little beer would suit me better, if it's all the same to you, my good sir," said Balin with the white beard. "But I don't mind some cake, seed cake if you have any." Lots, Bilbo found himself answering, to his own surprise. He found himself scuttling off to the cellar to fill a pint beer mug, and then to a pantry to fetch 2 beautiful round seed cakes, which he had baked that afternoon for his after-supper morsel. When he got back, Balin and Dwalin were talking at the table like old friends. As a matter of fact, they were brothers. Bilbo plumped down the beer and the cake in front of him, when loud came another ring at the bell, and then another ring. Gandalf for certain this time, he thought, as he puffed along the passage. But it was not. It was 2 more dwarves, both with blue hoods, silver belts, and yellow beards, and each of them carried a bag of tools and a spade. In they hopped as soon as the door began to open, and Bilbo was hardly surprised at all. "What can I do for you, my dwarves?" he said. "Killy at your service," said the one, "and Filly," added the other. They both swept off their blue hoods and bowed. "At yours and your families," replied Bilbo, remembering his manners this time. "Dwalin and Balin here already, I see," said Killy. "Let us join the throng."